Hey, it's Arlina here, and I have a quick favor to ask. If you haven't reviewed the ODAAT Chat podcast on iTunes yet, can I point you in the right direction to do so? The reviews and ratings on iTunes are the most important metrics for a podcast to rank well. And as you can imagine, it takes a lot of work to produce these episodes and get the message of recovery out to those who are searching for it. It would mean the world to me personally if you could take just a moment to rate and review it on iTunes by going to odaatchat.com and click the little iTunes button on the right-hand side. And if you do, you just might hear your review on the podcast.
This is ODAAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, friend. Welcome to another episode of the ODAAT Chat podcast. My name is Arlina, and I'll be your host. If you're new here, this is a podcast where my guests and I talk about how to recover from alcoholism and addiction. I'm looking to uncover the moments of clarity, the revelations, and the tools and practices for healing which lead to long-term recovery. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this interview because it's with Tracy Winchell, the host of Reboots Podcast. But before I do, I just want to share that this episode is sponsored by my free 7-day Connection Cure Challenge, how to overcome isolation and attract your tribe in 7 days. I know what it's like to feel overwhelmed by life and lonely because all you want to do is isolate. I did find a solution that has changed my life forever, and I want to share that with you. It's a free online course with a downloadable worksheet. So if you've ever struggled with things like loneliness and isolation, then you absolutely need to take this challenge and experience the relief that comes from feeling supported and connected. Sign up for free at soberlifeschool.com. So today is with my guest, the lovely Tracy Winchell, and she actually reached out to me and suggested that we trade interviews, and I am so glad that I did because Tracy is an amazing human being. And she goes to Celebrate Recovery, which is a religious-based, Christian-based recovery program. And listen, I don't discriminate. If you are finding recovery, whether it's Smart Recovery, Refuge Recovery, 12-step, a therapist, a friend, a podcast, maybe different support groups. I don't care how you get it, as long as you get it. I don't feel like there is any one program that has the market on recovery. So Tracy was kind enough to come on the show and share her experience with Celebrate Recovery. She talks about her life and what brought her to Celebrate Recovery. So this one is a little bit different. She suffers from codependency, and I'm here to tell you that it doesn't matter what the problem is, the solution is the same. The solution is spiritual, the solution is simple, and it has nothing to do with the problem. And I'll tell you that in the 24 years that I have been sober, I have seen people suffer from their codependency. There's a whole program around it. It's called Al-Anon. And it is one of the toughest and most, I want to say it's like elusive. It's just hard to pin down. It revolves around the gray area of recovery, like addiction and alcoholism is very like black and white, you know, and codependency will bring you to your knees just as any other disease left untreated will do. So I'm very grateful to Tracy for her time. I feel like I found a new kindred spirit in her, and I'm so grateful for, you know, just like a friend who was willing to share their story. So anyway, with that, please enjoy this episode with Tracy. Okay, so Tracy, thank you so much for joining me on the ODAAT Chat podcast.
I am happy to be here, Arlina. I really love what you're doing, and I think it's so important that we all do what we can to just kill the stigma of recovery because
Yes,
everybody can use the 12 steps to make a better life.
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I remember when I first got sober, I was receiving all this great information and I was like, oh my God, everybody needs this, you know, because I feel like we're all recovering from something, right?
Yes.
So, and this will be a little bit different because, Tracy, as you shared with me, you participate in Celebrate Recovery, and, you're recovering from a multitude of things, right? Not necessarily alcoholism and addiction, but I thought it was important to get your story out there because you have applied the 12 steps to your life to help you out of suffering. Right? Yep. The primary purpose is to carry the message to people who are suffering. So yep. I appreciate your transparency with all the things that you go through and how you've been able to, find recovery and find peace, and that you're willing to get the information out there so that other people can be eased out of their suffering as well.
It's equal parts obligation, honor, and obedience. I share my story because I'm built for it, and I'm driven to do it. So thanks for having me, Arlina.
I mean, many are called, but few care to listen, right? So,
I guess so.
Yeah. So thank you for showing up today. So typically the way I start is we kind of go over, what you do professionally, and then I would love to hear, how you grew up and about your family of origin. Sure. So you want to start with what you do for a living?
Well, I do some consulting. I'm working on building a business, and my podcast, the Reboots Podcast, is a tool to do that. I have, for many years, been in communications. I started my career as a radio broadcaster in about 1983, maybe. I was in television beginning in 1984 and stumbled into an on-air career. I covered a campaign back in 1992. A guy you might have heard of, Bill Clinton, was yes. Governor of the state of Arkansas at the time. And then I made the next logical leap in my career out of covering a presidential campaign to financial services. I got my securities licenses and worked for a friend for 9 years. We built a financial services firm from scratch. I worked for him for 9 years. And then I went to work for a local municipality doing economic development and communications. And after 12 years, the elected officials decided they wanted to move in a different direction for a lot of different reasons. So after, probably 6 or 7 of us on senior staff in the municipal government, we were gone. I was one of those who they just eliminated my position. And that's been not quite 3 years ago. So I've spent the last year and a half really working exclusively on my podcast because a close friend died suddenly. And I switched out of all of my communications consulting and decided, you know what, if I'm ever going to do this, it needs to be now. I'd always thought I would build a platform after I built my consulting business and sort of started turning a profit rather than just breaking even. And we came home from my friend Ray's celebration of life, and I just said, I'm firing everybody. So in that 3 years, a bunch of stuff has happened. I sold my house, put the money in the bank, and moved about 20 miles down the road, moved in with my mom. And so we have a really good life. This is more of it's a farming community. And so I think there are probably more cows and soybeans than there are humans.
Where are you located?
I'm just outside of Fort Smith, Arkansas, in a little community called La Vaca. And we have one of the best pizza joints in the region. People come from
wow, really?
From a long way away, especially on their motorcycles in the spring and summer and fall.
Wow, for pizza.
Yeah, it's just it's a cool little community. Our front yard, our front yard looks it looks pretty suburban, and the backyard is rural. And so it's a really good life. And for the first time in my life, as important as my career is, and trying to build this business out of obedience, out of as a result of my recovery, it's less important to get the big story. It's less important to win an award. It's less important to save the world, and a lot more important to influence my friends, and to be a good listener, and to be a good sponsor, to be a good daughter, and be a really good friend. Yeah. That's kind of where I am now.
No, that's a beautiful thing. I think as you and I are close in age, and I think as we get older, it's, I agree. It's like the outside stuff has become less and less important to me. And it's been more about matters of the heart that really matter, because that's what we leave behind. It's not about the money. Quick side note. I have actually been out to Arkansas. I was in Little Rock. And HP has a facility out there. I forget what city it's in.
Oh, it's Conway.
In Conway, that's right.
Sure.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, Arkansas has the best barbecue I've ever had.
It's good, amazing. Isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I wore a pair of jeans on the plane that were way too tight on the way home. It was amazing. Yeah. A little surprised about the pizza, but the barbecue was off the hook. Yeah. So, okay. So I thought we would also kind of go over your family of origin. So obviously you and your mom have a good relationship now. But what was life like growing up? What were your parents like?
It was awesome. Only child, a ton of cousins. I had, I'm the oldest daughter on my mom's side, granddaughter. One of the youngest on my dad's side. And so we spent a lot of time with extended family. And so I never really felt like I was an only child. I was kind of the oldest granddaughter on one side. So I had 3 older cousins, and we killed snakes, went fishing down at the pond, got thrown off the mule, chased the bulls, right.
Wow.
And so it was, I grew up in Little Rock, and so we lived in the city, right?
Yeah.
For Arkansas,
awesome.
The biggest. Yeah. And so on my dad's side,
actually a pretty cool city.
It is. On my dad's side, I was kind of coddled, picked on by the older cousins, and I love my aunts and uncles. I spent time in both places every summer, and I even though I was kind of spoiled on my dad's side of the family, I was just always treated as much of an adult as possible. I drove my cousin into town in a brand new Delta 88 when I was 13. God. Joe Bob, you get that, you go take Bit to town, and come on back. I can't drive your car. I'm 12. I'm going to whip you if you don't take her to town. I don't have time for this. She wouldn't have. My aunt wouldn't have done that, but she had me, so I wrecked my uncle's car, and so, not in a bad way. I just scraped the side of it.
That was their fault for
gate. He's standing there holding the gate watching me, and he's standing there laughing, and it's just, So anyway, life was really good. What I discovered through my first time through step 4, though, is that about age 6, I didn't process grief well. Some of my closest friends, they lived across the street, and their dad left them. And I grieved over that for a long time.
Really?
And so,
why were you so affected by somebody else's dad leaving?
I don't know. I think maybe I've always been kind of sensitive. Maybe that's sort of the leading edge of codependency.
Oh, okay.
I've worked my way through that question in the past 5 years a bunch of different times, because I'm curious like you. And the first time I worked my inventory, I just looked at the sheets recently because I was teaching an inventory lesson 4 months ago. And so I refreshed myself on that. And there were some things that I'd written down 5 years ago that I'm like, no, that's not right. And so I kind of worked through that. And I don't know, Arlina. I don't know.
Yeah, some people just come by it naturally. I mean, and listen, codependency in its severe forms, it can be deadly, right? So, and that's one of the reasons why I was like, yeah, this is something we need to talk about, because codependency it can be very dark. So, and it sounds like at age 6, you were already deeply affected by it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And so that's, a lot of people get hung up and they get scared at step 4 and they want to quit.
Yes.
But I had to have that for the reasons that brought me to recovery. And I don't want to jump ahead too much. We can get into that when you're ready, but it was really, really important for me to walk myself through, chronologically, my childhood, which was really good. I mean, my parents are awesome. They're not perfect.
Right. They're human.
Yeah. They're beautiful. And the cool thing about that time at age 6 is my dad was a child of divorce, and it was rough. He still doesn't talk about it, but I understand kind of what happened, and I'll leave that for somebody else's story to tell, because I wasn't there. But my folks did the very best that they could through that. It was great. I was able to say, are you going to get a divorce? And they just sat me down as many times as I needed and said, look, we are not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. We are in this for the long haul. And there are days when we don't like each other very much, but we love you. We love each other. And we got married knowing we were not going to separate our family. And I bought into that. Because they really explained to me why it was so important for my dad, because of the childhood that he had and the divorce that, in the 40s and the 50s, man, you just didn't do that in a small town. You didn't get it.
That's brutal.
Yeah. And so they really did a good job in trying to mitigate that. But through my childhood, there are just these threads of grief. I had an aunt that I was very close to. She lived with us for a little while. And she had a son he's 9 years younger than I am, and he was as close as I'm ever going to have to a little brother. And at some point, she left her husband, and they just left. It devastated my mom. They were best buddies. And so I'm probably 13 or 14 at this time. And I grieved the loss of that relationship with her for a long time. And, we kind of sort of put it back together again as best as we could. But she died several years ago of forgot what kind of cancer. It came very quickly. And so she and my mom kind of made amends. It wasn't a little house on the prairie kind of everything's perfect again. But, you start kind of forwarding through all of these moments of grief, the loss of a relationship that I kind of thought was going to be the guy. It ended badly. We are still friends now. So I grieved that. And that was kind of my first experience with depression. So this probably would have been jumping all over the map. Arlina.
That's okay. That's my style.
This probably would have been like, probably mid to late 90s. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of my first experience with depression. I got some treatment, got better, and kind of collapsed 2 or 3 years later. My first bout of pneumonia, diagnosed with asthma. And that, I kind of put it all back together for a little while. But again, there is a loss, right? Mm-hmm. It's not the death of someone, but it's the death of a relationship. And so these threads of grief just kind of manifested itself, and just kept getting worse and worse and worse. I just didn't process it well.
Yeah, it sounds like, it sounds like a reoccurring theme of abandonment. Tell me about the relationship. Was that was a romantic relationship? Were you going to get married?
I thought so. Yeah. It just kind of didn't.
Together?
I don't know, off and on for a couple of years. It was one of those friendships things, and it bloomed and it blossomed. It was long distance, and I want to protect my friend's story, because I'm grateful for the opportunity to renew that friendship after several years of just oh my goodness. And I value his friendship, and I think that he's one of my biggest supporters. He's just a good guy. He was wrong. I was wrong. It was a shock the way it ended. And, I didn't deal with it well.
Yeah. It sounds like, with a reoccurring theme of like abandonment or loss, that it's difficult to find a way to cope with that or resolve. And it's been my experience that if it's something is reoccurring, it's like the next time it happens, it brings up all the pain from the past. And so it's you're re-experiencing the past experience, and then you have the current experience, and then if it's not resolved, you just carry it into the next time.
And see, if someone had told me that, after about the 6th or 7th time I was handling grief badly, I would have told him that's stupid and leave me alone and don't ever talk to me about that again. Right. And so I can remember probably 7 or 8, 9 years old when my friends across the street would go on vacation with their dad, and they wouldn't be across the street. And I wasn't in Batesville or Danville with my extended family for the summer. I'd get bored and I would pout. My mom would say, and she's still like this, my mom's very gregarious and people love her. She's an amazing listener. And so I can remember these conversations. I was just little. And she would say, well, and I had some friends next door too, and they were awesome and we were pretty tight. And she would say, let's invite so-and-so over. And she had her set of friends, and I didn't like very much, but she said, you're going to have to get over that because she needs me as a friend and a mom. And she doesn't have to be your friend to come spend the night with me and be my friend. So I kind of got past that real quick. And so she would say, let's have so-and-so over. I don't like them. And well, they're okay, but that's just too many friends. And I have felt that way my whole life, Arlina, and people are shocked and they don't believe me when I say that. But I just kind of have always needed a core group of really close friends. I just don't, I'm such an introvert that it's exhausting to be the kind of friend I want to be when the numbers kind of get out of control. And what's that number? I don't know.
Right. It can even be time, right? Like too much.
Yes. Time. And energy.
Yeah.
And so from a really early age, it was just, that's kind of what I need. But I've always felt this pressure to, I guess it's a codependency thing again.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting that your mom was asking you to set aside your feelings so that she could have the people in her life that she needed to have. You know what I mean?
Well,
like
and
we are
for,
kind of taught by our parents on how to handle our feelings.
for her, though, I don't know that it was set your feelings aside. It's just that, you're an only child and you are my daughter and I love you, but I'm not exclusively in this world for you and you alone. I have other friends.
Yeah.
I have other people who love me and need me. And even though you are almost everything in my life, there has to be more to your life and mine than just each other.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's important. Like, and honestly, I feel like, and I've been talking about this a lot lately about connection. It's so important to have connection because it gives us self-esteem. It gives us an opportunity to be of service. And we really do sort of recover together. In recovery, connection is super important. So it is important to have a balance, and it's important to recognize where your limits are, right? Like we have boundaries, but sometimes we don't know where the boundaries are until we cross them. And then it's important, right? It's important to recognize, like, well, wait a minute. It's like these people are draining me and I'm tired. I need to be able to, go away and recharge.
And so I still have to ask myself this, and I work with my sponsor through this. Where's that boundary line between isolation and
connection
and self-care?
Self-care. Yeah. That is such a great, I'm so glad you brought that up. Isolation versus self-care. And it seems like there needs to be balance between the two, right? Especially for people who are, I'm mostly extroverted, but people exhaust, I do so need my alone time.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think it's important? How do you differentiate? So how do you recognize when you've crossed the line from, sorry, I might have to edit a so the question is, how do you go from self-care to isolation? Like, where's the line for you?
Well, I think there are several answers to that. Is first of all, accepting, the acceptance thing, accepting the reality that will always be a tension in my life. It is a tension. I will never fix this tension.
Okay.
I can use the tension as leverage to challenge myself to be better.
Are you saying tension between isolating and
yes.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yes. And I don't remember the Viktor Frankl quote about tension, but that resonates with me when he talks about that tension is a necessity in order to thrive. I'm really bastardizing that, and I apologize.
No worries. I'll look it up and we'll put it up on.
But it is an excerpt from Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have been meaning to read that book. I keep hearing how good it is.
Arlina.
Yeah, good one. Man's
Girl,
okay.
That's one of those at least every 5-year reads.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
I have an Audible credit.
Yes, use that.
Okay, Man's Search for Meaning. I'm totally going to do that today. Thank you so much.
And you're going to either want a Kindle or a paperback copy, because you're going to end up just highlighting everything. It's
okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Anyway, so yeah,
tension.
Yeah, okay. that tension between isolationism and self-care is a big deal. And by the time I got to the point of recovery, I had just totally isolated myself. Anytime someone would reach out to me, there was this anger and resentment, and I rejected community. I rejected church.
Mm-hmm.
I rejected all of it. I didn't want anybody but God. I don't know. Just
was when you were in depression after the breakup? Was that happening then, or?
Yeah, and it progressively just continued to just I don't know, yeah, it kept going. It's just a snowball effect, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Depression is, I've heard it said that depression is anger turned inward.
Oh yeah. A lot of times, and I know that a lot of times that's a chemical thing, and so I don't want to ever dismiss depression as a medical diagnosis.
Sure. Yeah. We're not doctors. We don't play one on the internet.
Right. but and I don't know. So yeah, anger turned inward. That is totally me.
Do you feel like that do you feel like it completely clouded like your inner vision? Like that's all you could see was your pain and
oh yeah.
Yeah. It feels like you're in a dark hole and
yeah, sure. I was functional a lot of the times.
You're working and
yeah, sure.
You go to work and come home and then
and excelling.
Were you getting, is that where your perfection, because we were talking earlier about perfectionism, is that where your perfectionism was kicking in? Was it at the worst while you were depressed, or how did that look for you?
I don't know. I think there have always been these shades of perfectionism, highly motivated. A lot of friends in junior high and high school. I played sports. I wasn't very good at it. I had a great arm for softball. I could chatter, so they put me in the outfield to throw. They put me behind the plate to annoy the batter. I was barely 100 pounds soaking wet, so I played basketball. My mom played ball. She was an all-state in Arkansas.
Wow.
Yeah, she's 5'10". She's really good. And so I loved basketball, but I didn't have any upper body strength. I was a good ball handler, but I couldn't hit an outside shot. I couldn't even hit the basket. I could shoot layups. So what they would do is they would put me in the game. And man, I think we won one game in 4 years. We were bad.
That's pretty bad.
Small Christian school. And oh man, we were bad. And so when these big girls would be driving the lane, they would send in this, I was probably 5'5" at the time, so kind of tall, all knees and elbows, barely 100 pounds. And I was idiotic enough that I'd jump across the lane and hop in and take a charge. And I was really good at actually doing it because I was fearless.
Okay.
And then I was good at making sure my feet were set because I was pretty quick. And plus, even when my feet weren't set, the referees were like, I don't know whether they felt sorry for me or they admired my courage. But if all I had to do was just hop out there and make an effort, I didn't get blocking calls against me, but we'd foul these girls out. So I found a way to be useful.
Wow. I mean, you were literally putting yourself in harm's way for the benefit of others.
Yeah. It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, that's interesting though. Do you see how like you're like literally self-sacrificing for the benefit of others? Like, so these are all shades of codependency. And then going into television was what I was going to do. But when I became a broadcast journalist, here's my definition of broadcast journalism: getting paid poorly to do things mother told you never to do. Like what did mother never tell you to do?
Get shot at, go 90 miles an hour down a dirt road, knock on somebody's door and accuse them of wrongdoing when, you got stand up to politicians, are corrupt and you have the proof in your hands. Show up at traffic accidents and fires and push your luck with police officers. I've got to get the story. You're in my way. You're in danger. That guy in there has a loaded gun. We're waiting for the SWAT team.
Wow.
I would arrest you and throw you in jail, but I really don't want to do the paperwork. So if you're going to be here, then don't be an idiot. Duck down. And they just taught me how to take cover. You use the engine block and the tires and the wheels, and sit down and shut up. That kind of stuff.
Why do you feel like what was your motivating driver for doing all this, putting yourself
story.
But what was the purpose of getting the story? How
save the world.
Save the world.
And get kudos and be
external
the lead
validation.
And man, there's just a rush to all of that.
Right.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Tracy, that's a twisted, and listen, I'm not judging because.
I know.
Because my idea of fun was putting myself in harm's way. So it's the same thing, right? Even though like it was in a different form, but I was doing the same thing with drugs and alcohol, right? It's like, but I understand perfectionism. I understand putting myself in harm's way for, exhilaration or to get external validation. It's all the same thing. It's like we use people to fix ourselves. I used people all the time to fix my feelings, like things I didn't want to feel. And it just sounds like it makes sense, right? You're telling me your story about all this grief that you just, and depression. It's like we stuff our feelings. It's like we don't know how to deal with our feelings or resolve them or cope with them. So we have this compulsion, and it makes perfect sense that, that you do all this stuff. So tell me tell me a time when you decided that your way wasn't working. What was that dark moment where you decided something had to be different and you were able to find a solution that was going to help you start your journey into recovery?
My 80-year-old dad died. And I thought I was the only person that had ever happened to. And I did a pretty good job for a while. We lost my dad in April.
Mm-hmm. Y'all were super close.
Yeah. That my folks had moved here with me because I wasn't going back to Little Rock, and they just decided, we'd kind of like to have a place kind of out in the country, and so they wanted to be closer to me. And we had some good years, even though I was still obsessed with work, perfectionism, saving the world. And I was on a couple of teams that really did do the impossible. I was on the team that recruited the United States Marshals Museum to Fort Smith, Arkansas, which was, you're going to sneeze there.
I am sorry, you can see me on camera. I'm about to sneeze. I'm trying to cover my mic. Okay, go ahead. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
I stole your sneeze.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Sorry. You were
my dad died.
Okay.
And I just kind of made it work for a while. Mm-hmm. And then in probably January, February the following year, my anger just got, and I don't talk about this very much, but I'll try to share this. 11 days after my dad died, my mom and I decided, I need some new furniture for my house. The cat, who was really a cool cat and just came to me under kind of special circumstances as a kitten, a rescue. We had bought the furniture, we were waiting delivery, and found an acquaintance who was going to take the furniture, reupholster it, and give it away. My cat has never done this before, but she got in the couch, and the guys came, took the furniture away, and I didn't know she was gone. So this is 11 days after my dad died. I'm getting ready to go back to work after I'd opened the house, and the guys had taken away my furniture. I couldn't find her. She never got out without me. Oh my God. So I called the guy, and I think my cat's in there. Would you check? No, your cat's not in there. Your cat's not in there. And he's a super sweet guy. He did everything he knew to do.
Right.
Anyway, end of the day, they pull up to their shop to unload. The cat runs out into a briar bush. And so he called me immediately. We went over there. That was a really bad moment for me because I just ran into the briar patch, shorts on, short sleeves. And
for those of us in California, what's a briar patch?
It is a thicket where you can't see the ground. This one was taller than I am. I'm 5'6", and it's probably blackberries, just all kinds of thorns, thickets.
Oh my goodness! Okay.
So I am in there, and I'm just flailing my arms, and I'm yelling, and I just know she's in there. And we were there 15 minutes after they had seen her. And this cat, I won't go into the details, but she just always was precious to me. Mm-hmm. My identity, it turns out, was largely wrapped up in her, and especially after my dad died.
Oh yeah.
So I come. It's getting dark, and my mom is just standing there at the edge of this thicket, and it's along a railroad bed. And I came out of that, and she told me later I was just bloodied, scratches all over me, and I saw how devastated she was
to see you in such a state, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like you were really like in mourning and then desperate because you lost your beloved cat. Listen, I understand the love of an animal and what it's like to lose one. So I can only imagine just everything piling up, the grief and then the cat and yeah.
So I had so many amazing friends. I probably had 20 to 30 friends taking turns searching that grid, helping me keep the posters up for weeks.
Oh,
I mean, superhuman, heroic kinds of efforts. I knew everyone, all of the sanitation employees, the transit employees, firefighters, police officers, animal control. They were all looking for her, in addition to my friends out at the Air Guard.
Wow. Everyone was looking for him. What happened? Did you find your cat?
Never, ever found any sign of her.
Wow.
And so there were a number of other grief triggers, as there always are. And so by January or February after my dad died, the rage was uncontrollable. I was seeing my doctor, my primary care physician. Meds weren't working great. I was referred to a psychiatrist. I was doing counseling through my employer. Mm-hmm. I was seeing a friend of mine who's a minister. He was having me journal my way through the Sermon on the Mount. And that's kind of an important deal, it turns out.
The Sermon on the Mount book?
Yeah. Or just the Sermon on the Mount.
That's Augmandingo?
No, like Jesus' Sermon on the Mount.
Oh.
and the Beatitudes.
Got it. Okay, sorry.
Matthew 4, Matthew 5.
Mm-hmm.
We journaled through the book of I journaled through the book of John. And I'm like, I'm not coming back to church. Church people are idiots and they're hypocrites. And so he's like, okay, well, just bring me a Subway sandwich. We'll have lunch and we'll work our way through your journaling pieces. You do that every day as you want to. I'll talk you through it every couple of weeks. And I was so mad when I got to the Beatitude, blessed are those who mourn. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So I'm just furious. I'm not getting along with anybody. Work is actually beginning to suffer. Mm-hmm. One of my closest friends had in the past couple of years become my boss. High profile, high stress for all of us. Because as the communications manager, I'm dealing with media every day. I'm doing quotes occasionally. I'm a spokesperson for certain projects within the local municipal government. and he is the city administrator. He's in the paper nearly every day, on the news every day. And so we had to kind of suspend our friendship. And as soon as he took this job, most ethical human being I think I've ever met in my life. And so we had to talk our way through that. We will be friends always, but right now I'm your boss. And that's just how it has to be. And I'm like, absolutely, I'm glad you said this, because that's how I feel too. And so, you know, he was a friend of the family. He and my dad were close. And so all of this is kind of entangled together. But when my work started to struggle, you know, he was in a tough spot. And I was angry at him because my dad died. Abandonment much, maybe? Transference, maybe?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, this seems to be a reoccurring theme in your life.
Yeah, it does. And so in the middle of all of that, one of my closest friends, longest adult friends, she was my broadcasting mentor, turned kind of sister. She had moved to Fort Smith, and got me my job in Fort Smith at the local ABC affiliate, because everybody wanted her, because she was an incredible talent, still is, in communication and broadcasting. And so, you know, at this point, she was in 60 miles up the road in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and she'd come down to see me, and she's like, "You're in trouble here."
Wow.
And she had just begun Celebrate Recovery a few months. And I was like, I don't need that. I don't need that. That's dumb. I don't need anybody. I don't need people.
All right.
And things got so bad. I was so miserable. And I figured out, wait a minute. This Celebrate Recovery, it's based on the Beatitudes, which is in the Sermon on the Mount, that thing that really pissed me off. Blessed are those who mourn. Well, I'm just going to go give them a piece of my mind. Or maybe there's something to this. So I walked into my first recovery meeting I'm really bad at the year because all of those years are blurred together, but it was 5 years ago this past June.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want anybody to talk to me. We went through this orientation. I got a challenge, give it 6 weeks. And Celebrate Recovery, we begin with worship. There's music. So right now I'm involved in 2 different Celebrate Recoveries. One is a Church of Christ, which is where my mom goes. And she really has supported the launch of this. It started in January of this past year. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just go help out. I'm still there. Anyway, we worship, and I got this 6 week challenge my first night, which of course, you know, I'm competitive. I think we've kind of established that without talking about it.
Sure.
And at that time we met in the back in the student venue, a smaller venue. And so for several weeks I would show up, and I almost didn't get out of the car, but I waited until the music started. You hear the drums thumping. Okay, it's safe to go in because I don't have to talk to anybody.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Such a common. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would go to large group. Sometimes I would go to a small group. And I am directionally challenged, Arlina. I have trouble finding my way to a place. Right. So the first several weeks, I wandered around open share groups thinking I was going where I was the week before, but I wasn't. So I made my way into, and these are all gender specific.
Right. They separate, Celebrate Recovery separates men and women.
Yes. And the way it works is there are 25 lessons in our participants' guides. And so on large group nights, you're either going to get one of those lessons you work through. It takes a year to work through, because every other week we hear a story.
Okay.
And those testimonies meant the world to me.
Yeah. Why did they mean so much to you, do you think?
I realized I wasn't the only one whose 80-year-old dad had ever died. I wasn't the only person in the world who had experienced grief.
Right. You're not alone.
The magic moments for me began with listening to other people and learning to have empathy.
Right. Yeah.
So, I just kind of wandered around those small groups for a little while, and I usually was in tears and couldn't speak.
Oh.
And that was kind of okay.
Yeah.
And we're pretty blessed at the CR that I've been going to for 5 years, because several open share group leaders are counselors.
Wow.
Yeah. And the very first step study we ever did, a step study takes about 9 months. We work our way through those same participants' guides.
Mm-hmm.
I start to figure out what blessed are those who mourn means.
Can I stop you and ask you
Sure,
what does it mean? What is blessed? What did that turn out to mean for you?
It's less of yay, you're mourning, you've experienced great loss, and more of, you're broken, you've experienced hurt, and you know how to speak truth to, but even more importantly, empathize with other people who have experienced great loss.
Yes. So the quote is, blessed are those who mourn.
Yeah. That's Matthew 5 something. I can't remember now what it is.
You know what I thought? The first thing that came up for me when you said that, it makes sense to me, right? Because if you don't mourn, what is the alternative, right? Is we stuff our feelings, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, if we don't mourn, we stuff our feelings, and that's like poison, right? We harden our hearts to hold the poison in. And it's almost like, I have a friend recently who went through a breakup, and I don't know where these words came from, but it's like when our hearts break open, it's like the poison can come out. So while it was a painful experience, and then she was able to see how she wasn't necessarily mourning the current relationship, she was mourning every relationship before that. Like she had stuffed and stuffed and stuffed. And I almost see like, I can see
that's
that.
me.
Yeah, that's you.
That's totally me.
Yeah, I could see that pattern in your life where even from age 6, it's like you had grief after grief after grief. It's like all these people, and then your father passes away, and then, it breaks your heart, but until you are able to mourn, you're not able to resolve those feelings. But because you are able to mourn, look how blessed you are now.
Yeah.
Like you were able to resolve those feelings, and you're no longer carrying all that negativity with you.
So this is really cool, Arlina. My step study leader, a counselor, this very first step study, we met on Saturday mornings. I didn't get much out of it because I couldn't answer the questions really well. But what I got was an incredible sponsor. And my friend Ada is my sponsor. Mm-hmm. She had experienced great loss. She lost her twin boys. Premature births, and she shares her stories. She was one of my first podcast guests ever, and so the way she began to help me unpack my grief during that first step study, what a gift! Yeah, because she was able to say, look, every time I help someone like you process grief and learn to get your life back, the lives of my boys, Keaton and Caden, have meaning.
Oh, that just gave me the goosebumps. Yes, we need to process the grief. And it does add meaning.
Yes.
That's so beautiful.
There's old Viktor Frankl working.
I know. The Man's Search for Meaning. I'm totally going to have to check that out. No, I'm so glad you brought that up. And this is so important to listen. life is difficult, right? And there is a lot of pain. But, it's like they say that pain is the touchstone of all growth. And it sounded like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like you said the pain got so bad you were finally willing to you had to do something. And you had a friend that offered you hope. And you had the courage to walk into that meeting as afraid as you were and sit in the back, which is actually a very common reoccurring theme I've heard over and over again. It's like you're so desperate for relief that you're willing to do anything. And people show up and sit in the back of meetings until they get enough courage to say, oh, these people actually love me. And there is a solution, and we can resolve our pain. So can you kind of walk me through, we have about 10 minutes left, and maybe you can walk me through what some of your solutions are today, because it feels to me like recovery is about emotion management. It sounds like you have lots of good tools, as we were discussing earlier, to help you manage. Do you want to walk me through some of those tools that you use?
Yeah, I would love to. The first thing is to accept the fact that I'm broken, and that I do need other people, and that I do need to be part of a church community. I remember the first time my friend Ed in a recovery meeting said, people don't go to church because the church is filled with hypocrites, and you're right. That's why you're going to fit right in. That made me mad.
Well, it's so not fair because, people, I grew up in the church, right? And when I got sober, I was like, I don't like all those people because they're hypocrites and blah, blah, blah. They say one thing and do another. But the truth of the matter is they're still human. We all, but they're striving for an ideal. And I think there are some people who, walk the walk of true Christianity, which means that we are patient and loving and tolerant and accepting of each other. Like, just take the judgment right out. It's like, okay, when someone comes from that loving place and the judgment is absent, that to me is where I feel safe and where I get connected from the heart. And not all church groups are the same. Just like
cultural Christianity has made my inventory a couple of years. And I have to understand there's a difference. And even the ones who are cultural Christians and don't even know it, I still have to love them too, because there are no exclusion clauses on love one another.
Yeah.
Dang it.
That's it. Love one another. That's our job. I totally get that.
You asked me about my tools, and I took us down a rabbit hole, and I apologize.
I went right there with you. Sorry about that. Tell me about your tools.
But what helps me work my way through resentments is journaling. And I know that you're a prolific journaler, and I have used the 5-minute journal. I love it. I have kind of, I have kind of stolen some of the questions from there. But what I've figured out is that there are 3 or 4 cornerstone pieces that have to be part of my daily habit. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, it can't take me longer than 10 minutes for each of those cornerstone habits.
Okay.
And so a lot of people call the step 10 the maintenance step. Well, I can't, that's just kind of dumb, because I don't want to maintain. I want to keep getting better.
Yeah.
And so your listeners probably can't see this, but I create a card based on what I'm working on. And I'll just share this with you. This is the little step 10 template that I use, and I probably do 4 to 5 nights a week.
Can I ask you to maybe take a picture of it and we'll post it on the show notes? Is it personal or?
No, I'm going to do better than that, Arlina.
Okay.
I'm going to make you guys a sheet that gives you all of these questions and how I do it and why I do it, and make it available to your listeners so that you can do that.
Love it.
On the back of it, though, is my step 10 why. So I refresh this at least once a year. I'll refine it a little bit, but my step 10 why is, number 1, to see myself as I am, no better or worse. I do not want to compare myself with other people and say I'm better than those people. And I sure don't want to beat myself up, because I'm really good at that. I don't need any help with that.
Right. Yeah.
And so the second reason that I spend 7 to 10 minutes nearly every day doing my step 10 is to paint the target so that God and I can work together to eliminate perfectionism as an active threat to obedience. So when you think about perfectionism that manifests itself as procrastination to build the kind of platform and to tell the kind of stories that I believe I am called to do out of obedience to my Creator, and as a point of emphasis on my step 12, and perfectionism is killing that drive, no, that is not acceptable.
Right. I had a little aha moment when you were talking about perfectionism is procrastination. Can you say that again?
I don't even remember what I said there, Arlina.
Magical. It's a good thing we're recording this.
Here's the other piece of that.
Okay.
Best recovery book I have read this year is Finish by John Acuff, Jonacuff. It's a business book. It's a productivity book.
Ooh, I love those.
For me,
tell me his name again.
John, Jonacuff. And you think about it, I realized this about 4 years ago. The stuff we do with our journals, that's as important to entrepreneurs and business people. It's as important for professional and personal development as it is for recovery. We just call it something different. Yeah. We put a stigma on 12 steps, only we're teaching the same stuff and charging a buttload of money for these self-improvement things.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff.
Well, don't get mad.
It just is.
I know.
And so this step 10 is a big deal. I
love it. Yes. So you're going to make it available. How do we get a hold of it?
I'm going to stand up a page that says it's at rebootspodcast.com /ODAAT.
Perfect.
ODAAT.
Okay.
And another thing that I haven't put together yet, but one of the things that I do every single morning or every single afternoon is do what I call an NTNDS, Note to Next Day Self. When I first started doing this, I gave Next Day Tracy a laundry list of stuff that I didn't get done because I was procrastinating. Because of perfectionism, because I messed something up. You get this right tomorrow, Tracy. You do this, and this. And I've been doing this inconsistently for probably not quite 2 years, but I started earnestly in February, doing it nearly every day. And what I've discovered as I reflect through these journals, and reflection is so important to journaling.
You go back and read them?
Yeah. And I set up these little flags. This is a new journal, but normally this is a pretty new book, but when I do my reflecting or when I learn something that's, oh wow, I put these little sticky notes in there so that I flag them and I've got a note and I go back and refer to them.
Okay.
But this Note to Next Day Self has progressively been less about using the buggy whip on Next Day Tracy. And more about my approach to the day. So it's less in the weeds, more at about 10,000 feet, and more about attitude and the way I treat other people. And on the days when I have low energy, do what I can. Okay, give myself permission to do what I can.
Sounds like a more gentle NTNDS.
Yes, it is.
And it's about, and I keep hearing about setting your intention for the day. And, my prayers in the morning are more along the lines of relieve me of the bondage of self and use me for your purpose. All that I am, all the gifts that you've given me, help me to use them for your will. And what came up recently is that being willing to be of service is not always comfortable. And I was confused. I realized this is very recently, like this week, it's like, oh, I think I've been confused that I thought if I was living my purpose that I would be in joy and happiness and like in the flow. But like you were saying with the tension, you know, like that really resonated with me that, you know what, if I am willing to be in God's service, that I might be uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not very good at being uncomfortable.
Yeah, me either.
I tried yoga and I don't like being uncomfortable.
Yoga.
I don't like it.
I like it.
But it's good for me.
Yeah. Are you still doing it then?
No. My sponsor gave me 3 or 4 morning moves, 3 or 4 evening moves. And that was a month ago and I still haven't started them yet. And the reason she gave them to me is because I asked her for them.
Are you
I still haven't done it.
I
hope so.
I'll tell you what though, send me the moves and I'll do them.
Okay.
You do them. We can be accountability partners.
Okay.
All right. It's on record.
Okay. Oh no.
Oh no. We don't have to do them perfect.
But you know what, Arlina, you're right. I tell my sponsees this, and thank God for sponsees because it forces me to tell myself the truth.
Yeah.
It's like
absolutely.
Step work is not designed to be convenient.
Mm-mm.
It is work because that's the only way that, because see, there I go. I have to resist going back to the workaholic piece, but that's what this step 10 does for me. It helps me let go of the things that I can't control.
Balance. Yeah.
And it helps me identify the things I do that put me in a place to be vulnerable, first of all.
Oh, that's a big one.
And remind me to accept the things I cannot change.
Yes.
And we've kind of established, I rarely have trouble finding the courage to change the things I can.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about that so much anymore. I've kind of leaned the other way.
Right. Yeah. You know what? I am the same as you in the sense that I'm not afraid to do the footwork, but I struggle with acceptance.
Oh,
and I struggle with what's my job and what's God's job. Yeah. Like, and so acceptance and surrender has been my daily practice of setting that intention that I'm here to serve. It's not about what's on my agenda and me fixing me because that's taking my self-will back, but really giving into God's will for me.
You're right.
Which is typically 10 times better than my will for me anyway.
And that, man, you're right. I may think I want an ice cream sandwich for dessert, and I may pray for that ice cream sandwich. And
do you pray for that?
No, I'm just thinking of something easy.
Oh, okay.
To think of. I know we're running out of time. And then God gives me a Freddy's turtle for dessert, right? One of those things in caramel and chocolate and walnuts, and it's just like, I was thinking too small.
Yes.
I was thinking way too small for that thing. And that's where hard work meets divine intervention.
Yes.
On the other side of that wall is this thing that God really wants to bless us with, but we have to go get it sometimes. And knowing the difference between it's right here in front of me, don't miss this sunrise, it's beautiful,
right.
Versus go get that thing on the other side of that stupid wall inside your own head.
The wall of fear.
Anxiety, perfectionism, all of those character flaws. For me, that's what recovery is. I realize that you probably have some listeners who don't share my faith, and I'm cool with that. But in my faith, when it comes to the cross, the blood shed, if I'm going to really buy into that as a Christian, if I really, truly buy into that and don't just say I do, I have to accept the fact that at this point, because of my acceptance, God sees me white as snow. even though right in this moment, I'm still a mess. I'm still hurting other people. I'm still hurting myself.
Mm-hmm.
I am not perfect, but God sees me that way if I truly accept the blood of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do that, I have to get out of my own way. And that's what the 12 steps of recovery do. And the 12 steps of recovery are nothing more than the Beatitudes, which is that sermon Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount. Whether you buy into the supernatural thing or not, most people recognize that this Jesus guy kind of had something going on because we're still talking about him.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus didn't have hang-ups or habits, but Jesus had hurts. He's the guy. He had to go say, Judas, you come with me. I know exactly what you're going to do to me, but come with me. I'm going to love you. I'm going to accept you. I'm going to teach you everything I know. You think maybe that didn't hurt just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
And when he taught the Sermon on the Mount, when he taught the Beatitudes, that was how he lives his life. I think it's probably good enough for me. And that's where the 12 steps came from.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's amazing.
And that's where I began to understand that whole blessed are those who mourn thing. That's not what I thought it was. I have to look at everything in context. I have to challenge myself every day.
Yeah, we gotta go.
That's part of my recovery. It's part of my faith. It helps me get out of my own way and see me as I believe God sees me, for better or worse. Doesn't give me permission to screw up because I know everything's going to be okay. And in fact, it motivates me.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I've learned about the 12 steps of recovery. And, you know, we started this conversation by talking about how we all have stuff in the way.
Yes. Yeah, we all suffer hurts and have our challenges, and everyone's recovering from something. And, you know, I often say that it doesn't matter what the problem is. The solution is the same. The solution is simple. The solution is spiritual, and the solution has nothing to do with the problem. You will not hear me spend them. Yeah, it's not good. I can see your face on that. Not good. I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, oh my goodness, that's because big. I don't, you know, all these outside things, addictions, codependency, all these things that we were recovering from, you know, when you get into recovery, it's not about those things. It's about what's driving the behavior. Like, you've been able to get to like the grief that was never resolved since you were 6 years old. And then it happened over and over again. It's like, what I'm hearing is that you have a process to resolve the pain. So you don't have the compulsion to act on whatever it is, the behavior it is that causes you so much pain, the perfectionism and the codependency. It's like you don't have to practice those things and you can have peace. So,
and you know, losing my friend has been really hard. He's been gone 2 years in October, and I still miss him. There are certain things that they're still really hard to accept, and I still struggle. That doesn't mean that, you know, oh, it's okay, so and so died, oh, no problem. It just means I have the steps to work through them, and I have a community of people
to support you,
who love me no matter what. I had no idea what I was missing when I'd pushed away community. So
we really do need each other. You know, recovery is about connection, you know. So listen, Tracy, thank you so much for being willing to come on and share your journey through all that grief and the hope that you give other people to, you know, give it a try. You know, the community, no matter where you find it, like people should just, you know, like I had to just keep looking until I found my people. And and it sounds like you kept looking until you found your people. And it sounds like you're in such a good place now. You have a community, you have support, you have hope, you're able to do the self-examination and all that work to help you manage your feelings as you walk through life, because life can be very stressful. And I just want to commend you for your courage. And thank you so much for doing your podcast. I'm going to put links to your podcast and the 10th step is it like a worksheet or a checklist?
Yeah.
We'll put a link to that. I'm going to go check it out myself. I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, I'll send that to you.
Yeah, send it to me.
Send it to you as soon as we finish up here.
Yeah, that would be great. And we'll I'm going to check in with you about doing the yoga challenge because I need to get moving myself.
I know, right?
Everybody needs an accountability partner. So listen, thank you so much for your time today, Tracy.
I'm so glad to get to know you, Arlina.
I really enjoyed our
awesome.
conversation. Thank you so much. I learned so much from you today.
I can't wait to get to know you better. Thanks, Arlina.
All right. You have a great day. We'll talk soon.
One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting ODAATchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.